My name is Jeff Fritz. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft .NET and Visual Studio teams. I work on Azure Developer Experience. I work a lot with Aspire, helping folks get content, videos, demos, samples, blog posts to help explain and get folks into and understanding what Aspire is and getting you successful with it. And that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you how we can take a simple existing application that is it's a silly little sample, but we'll have some fun with it, and we're going to migrate it, Aspirify it, and make it into something that is much more enterprise quality by the end of our session together here today. So lots of live coding, lots of opportunities for me to tinker, to break things, and have a good time along the way. All right, so let's talk about what Aspire is and get into the topic a little bit. Modern .NET apps have a lot of really complex scenarios that you're dealing with, right? We've got lots of intricate application architectures that we're dealing with because you've got microservices and APIs, background workers, hosted services. You've got these complex interconnected services that you have to deal with, you have to manage, you have to figure out how to get these things connected and be able to monitor what's going on across that entire system. We want to be able to deploy things and make them cloud native. We want to be able to push things out to your favorite cloud service. Maybe it's run by the bookstore. Maybe it's run by the search engine. Or maybe it's a lovely blue shade. Nice fluffy blue shade out there. You want to be able to push it out to one of those, and you want to have resilience when it gets out there. Hey, there's a problem that's happening in the data center and it's still running. You want to have observability. It's running in somebody else's data center. You want to know what's going on with your application system. And you want to be able to scale. The whole reason you put it on the cloud is so you could get that cool slider bar on the dashboard so you could say, I don't have one instance, I now have two. I now have four. Because it used to be someone's job to come in on Saturday morning after the servers were delivered and put them on a rack, and sometime 12 hours later, the servers were done being booted up, installed, and put into the cluster. But now you can do it with a slider, and you want to be able to continue doing that and have that experience and importantly, be able to develop for it locally. There's all kinds of operational challenges that we as developers have now. There's these operational tasks that we start falling into. How do I manage my network structure? How do I do DNS between my various hosts? I want to have my API be able to see that API over there, but I don't want it visible outside the firewall. How do I manage all of those things? And then I've got to deal with containers and setting up and managing and versioning these things and bringing them in and out. And which ones do I use? It's tricky, it's annoying, and it's things that for us as developers, you don't want to be spending time doing things that are outside of your core competencies. You want to be able to build and work with the things that you're good at, solving problems, writing code, and solving problems with code, right? So that's where Aspire comes in. Aspire is a polyglot distributed application stack. See, I had to change that because we literally released an update last week and it changed. So Aspire is going to help you build distributed applications, and distributed applications can be just a website and a database. That's distributed because you have two systems working together. We're going to streamline those complex development processes and architectures, make them really easy for you to do with some opinionated choices that make your job better and, quite frankly, more fun. We're going to give you some built-in orchestration and diagnostics so you don't have to think about all these YAML files floating around, your kubectl files that have all the different things about the various pods that you're managing and where they're rolling out. That's nice. There's a skill set to that. I'm a developer. I don't want to manage YAML. I don't want to have to go and figure out the structure of these things. I'm going to be able to do this in C# and be able to deploy and manage how all of these things work together. I want to do service discovery so I don't have to care about what the port number is that various servers are working on, or the host name that they're working on, or maybe there's an API key that I have to deal with. I don't want to have to deal with any of that stuff. When I'm in development, just work. The management and delivery of those things is something that the folks in operations can take care of when we get to production. And we want to make sure that Aspire is developer first and reliable. We're going to make sure that you are productive, that we get out of your way and light up features that you need. You don't even know you need it yet, but you need it. We're going to light them up from the get-go and make your projects easier to build and more robust. And Aspire does this through 6 tenets. We're going to give you some smart defaults. We know that you want to log information in your applications, and you have an iLogger out there that maybe you're using, maybe you're not using. But we're going to give you some smart defaults to be able to take that content that you would be logging and automatically use standards like OpenTelemetry to create logs and distributed traces and metrics. We're going to give you orchestration so that you can take your application that you're building and that Postgres database that you're connecting to and run them appropriately at the same time or next to each other and launch them in the appropriate orders so that you can have them collaborating appropriately. We're going to give you integrations with some of your favorite services. I mentioned Postgres. Everybody likes to use Microsoft SQL Server. You can stand up and run SQL Server on your desktop inside of a container, and we're going to give you one line of code to do that. Really cool to be able to do that. I mentioned service discovery so that we eliminate all those API keys, all those passwords that you might be passing around. We're going to make that very easy for you to do. We want to make sure that you can deploy this whole smash out to whether it's our cloud, it's the bookstore's cloud, it's the search engine's cloud, maybe it's even on-prem. Or maybe it's a Raspberry Pi cluster that you have hanging out in your office. That's okay too. We're going to make sure that you can do that deployment. And we're going to do all this with that developer dashboard. You're going to have insight into how your application is building and running and all kinds of insights into your application as you're working with your system. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier for some of the folks that were here, and I see we've got some more folks joining us. That's fantastic. Thank you for coming in. There's a QR code on the bottom corner of the screen. That'll take you, if you scan that, that'll take you to a website that'll give you a link to the Aspire homepage and a link to these samples that we're going to see today, as well as the slides if you want to share and show them to your colleagues back at the office. There's also a QA board there, a question and answer board there. You can click into and take a look at and ask questions without having to get up out of your seat, raise your hand or something like that. And I will pause every now and again and answer questions like right now. We have this question that came in. Is Aspire the successor to Service Fabric? Good question. Aspire is not a service that runs on the cloud. Aspire is a way for us to bring together these 6 different things and make your applications better. Now, it was originally just .NET. We would hook these things all up to. But we now have support in the box for JavaScript and Python projects also. So it's not a Service Fabric cloud thing. You can deploy and run this wherever you want. But when you're working locally as a developer, we're going to set you up and put standards into your applications that make it easier for you to do the right things and the things that, quite frankly, I don't want to do. I don't want to go through my code and write logger statements. I don't want to go through my code and have to write metrics collection statements. We're going to do a lot of that for you right from the get-go. So a little bit different than Service Fabric. We'll talk more about some of these things that we can do as we get into the demo, because that's my last slide. The rest of this is live coding, all right? I want you to ask questions. We'll get into this. I will pause along the way. There's a couple of neat things that we're going to do here. And like I said, you've already got the source code, all right? Let's do this. Let's get into this. We've got about another hour here to do some live coding and play along at home. We're going to start off with this simple application. This is a website called My Weather Hub, and it's going to collect and present data from the National Weather Service, the United States National Weather Service. They make a RESTful API available that you can hit and query and get data about any of the thousands of weather monitoring stations that they have all over the United States, even Alaska and Hawaii. And I thought, because I've been dealing with the Blazor templates that have that stupid weather demo that's just random numbers in it, I thought it'd be fun to build a demo that actually uses real weather data. So we built this demo that has a front-end website built-in Blazor, and it has a back-end API that is just ASP.NET, and it knows how to go and connect out to the National Weather Service. And there's a little class in here that knows how to go out, there it is, knows how to go and connect to the National Weather Service. So let me start up the solution. Now, this is two projects because I have an API that runs with ASP.NET. I have a website that runs its Blazor. I need to actually configure multiple startup projects here, right? And I need to make sure that these start in the proper order here. And you know what? I'm going to start this one without debugging. And yeah, go ahead and do that. Sure. And now I can click the start button up here, and it's going to compile all these things. And we're going to have an application running with a couple of console windows there. I've got two browser windows that open up, and you can see over here, if I go there and I go to this one, here's my API over here on the left, and it's got this structure that's defined for me. That's fine. But over here on the right is my weather website, and I'm using a Blazor quick grid here, so I can jump in and search for a location. Let's search for Orange County, Florida. Click into there, and it's going to reach out to that API and go query the weather in Orange County, Florida, if I've got a decent connection here. I know we've had a problem with the connections. There we go. So now I've got some weather coming in and being reported for Orange County, Florida. Not bad. Clear, patchy fog after midnight tonight, lows around 60, east winds around 5 miles an hour. Okay. Tomorrow, highs in the lower 80s. Oh, that's going to be nice. All right, cool. So I've got some real data running here, but if I need to see what's going on inside this application, I've got two console windows here that I've got to run through. And I don't know about you, but for some of the developers that are used to reading these logs, you're going to look back and forth here and go, man, there's a lot going on there, and it's hard to kind of associate back and forth, right? And if I have a lot of traffic coming through my system, looking at this, these things are going to be flying by quickly, and I'm going to be like Cypher from the Matrix, watching text go flying by and have to decipher that, right? That's hard. And especially when you try to hand that off to someone in operations to take a look at this, they're gonna struggle, and they're gonna need some training for what to look for inside your code. So we're gonna start to stitch these together, and we're gonna add Aspire and solve a couple of these problems. Because there's also underneath the covers over here, inside my app settings for the website, I actually have an endpoint that's declared here that knows where the API is. So I've literally got hard-coded, here's where the API is, and I'm going to need to update that and move it around when I get into my production space. So there's a lot to be said here about things that we can improve and make this easier. Let me go to to a question that we got here. This question, I have a 100 project solution that has evolved from .NET 4 circa 2011 to .NET 10. Fantastic. Any tips about migrating to this? You're going to see in just a second here, it's going to be real easy for you to roll this out and add to your various systems as we start to bring just these two pieces together. You're going to be able to cogen's the wrong word, but you're going to be able to stitch together and get the references between your various systems that you're doing by hand right now. You're going to be able to do it with a little bit of programmatic help, thanks to our friends on the Visual Studio team. I'll show you that in just a second. Let me take this next step, and let's start bringing .NET and Aspire into this and learn how it's going to help make managing this application better. I'm going to start off by adding what's called the Service Defaults project. So I'm going to add a new project here, and I'm going to reach in and grab Aspire Service Defaults. And I'm just going to call this Service Defaults. Sure, .NET 10, Aspire 13. Those are our latest versions as of last week. And now it creates this project down here, Service Defaults, with one class in it called Extensions. We built this one C# class in this one project that's going to light up and give you access, opinionated access, to some .NET features that are already available that, quite frankly, nobody uses. Nobody uses until they're like, oh, crumbs, I need that. Let me go add it in. So open telemetry is something that when you get into bigger, larger enterprise scale applications, you're going to want to collect that telemetry, the logging, the metrics from your application and put it in one place so that you can discover what's going on, right? And folks will go and integrate Datadog or SolarWinds or Azure Monitor and start analyzing that content. Well, we're going to give you the ability to wire that up right from the get-go with this configure open telemetry statement. And if I F12 into that, you'll see it's using the standard open telemetry things that we ship. We've been shipping for 3-4 years. And we're going to turn on formatted messages, scopes. We're going to put together metrics from the get-go for ASP.NET Core, for your HTTP clients, and for the .NET runtime. Additionally, down here, we're going to set up ASP.NET Core instrumentation and HTTP client instrumentation down here that will allow us to see more information. And then we'll set up some exporters. There's information down here that will put it to our dashboard. And we've already got some templated instructions here to push it out for Azure Monitor. So that's kind of cool that we have these facilities available to us. Additionally, this is going to set up service discovery. It's going to set up health checks because somebody in operations wants to monitor the health of your system so they know when to call you and say, hey, the app's broken, go fix it, right? And we're going to set up some HTTP client defaults so that we get resiliency. And we'll bring in that library poly that allows us to do retries and short-circuiting when there's failures so that we don't end up in some sort of a death spiral trying to request a site that doesn't exist. These are all blocks of code and using libraries that are already available. We're just going to make them easier for you to do in a formatted standard extensions file that you can wire up to any one of your projects. So if I want to wire these up to my projects, and gosh, we saw the question, 100 projects I've got to deal with. You can wire it up by just dragging that service defaults project onto the other projects, and it will add that reference. So you can sit here and mouse for an hour and drag and drop the things around. You could also set up a build properties file and roll that out appropriately. But there you see my service defaults dependency, and same thing down here, service defaults. I'll connect up the interactions for those service defaults inside the program of both of these by just adding a statement, builder add service defaults. Thank you. So I've got that available, and down here in the website, nearly forgot up here, I want to make sure I add the health check endpoint. So I will add use default, not default files. It is, oh, come on, Fritz. Map default endpoints. That's what it is. Not use. Map default endpoints. There we go. All right. So that's going to set up health checks inside my application. Now this is the API. Let me go do the same thing in the weather website. So up here, I'll do, and it doesn't really matter where it is in the top half. Add service defaults. Thank you, Copilot. And down here, app.map default endpoints. Thank you. So, hey, that's great. Go away. So now I've got these two things set up, and it's going to start doing better logging for me inside of my application system. But I want that to show up where I need it inside of a dashboard where I can collect and orchestrate and see all these things working together. I'm going to come to this question in just a second after I show the dashboard. So here I'm going to set up what's called the app host project. And the app host is the central jump off point for Aspire. It's a way for us to add in an entry point that's going to give you access to manage your entire application system. Now the question we have here that was submitted, and I'll put this up on the screen. Why did we go from Aspire 9.5 to 13? .NET 10 was released. Why didn't we call it 10? Good question. And the team answered this as part of .NET Conf last week. They didn't want to upgrade the version number to Aspire 10 because they didn't want to be versioning at the same pace with .NET, because the goal that they're trying to reach is they want to be polyglot. They want to support and be visible and help folks that are using more than just .NET, that are using Python and Node.js and Java and Rust and Go. They want to enable folks in those other ecosystems. So they didn't want to use 10 because 10 would essentially convey the message, hey, we're still .NET. They didn't want to use 11 because it's Windows 11, and they didn't want to convey, hey, we're part of Windows 11. They didn't want to use 12 because 13 was right there, and nothing at Microsoft is version 13. It's also a prime number. They were like, we're going to do that one. We're going to be the rogues and go get 13. So they went to 13. So we'll choose 13 there, and we'll jump into this. And you'll see over here, it adds for me an app host project. An app host project looks a little bit like some of the source code you might see to build an ASP.NET website. We've got a distributed application, we're going to create some sort of a builder, and then we're going to go and run this thing. We're going to build the builder and run it. So, I've always wanted to do this. Okay, so I've now got Bob the Builder. All right. Moving on. So I want to use my app host to be able to connect and manage and orchestrate my two resources, my API and my website. So I can give the app host insight into those projects by adding references. So once again, I will drag API this time onto app host, and I'm going to grab the weather website and drag that onto app host. Now, that feels a little weird, but I can start and manage both websites from inside of here by saying Bob, add project. And I now have inside of here, I have this generic. I'm adding a project and I want to specify which project I'm adding. So check this out. I have a little bit of code gen that runs behind the scenes that gives you the ability to choose one of those projects that's referenced. So I'm going to add the API project. And now I can give that project a resource name. So I'm going to name that just API. And I'm going to assign that project, let's assign that to a variable called the API. That's, wow, what happened there? All right, so now I need to start the website. So let's create, oh, wow, that's pretty good. I'm just going to call this web. So Bob add project, projects, my weather hub, and I'm going to call that resource web. Okay, that's a resource name. Think of that almost like a pseudo host name that you might have floating around on your network. Okay. Now with these two referenced and in here, with no other code written, I'm going to come through and change my startup project to the app host, and let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot and see what's happening there. I'm going to come to this question in just a second. That's a good question about Poly that's been created here for us. So here we go. This is my .NET Aspire dashboard. It comes in dark and light. So yeah, light mode also. And you can see it's got my API, it's got my website, and here's the URLs for those two services. I'll click into the app host for my weather. There's my weather stations, and let's jump in here and let's search for Manhattan. And I'll click into New York, Manhattan, and there's my weather for Manhattan, and I'm glad I'm not there. Man, that's cold. So, my website still works, my API works, but this is all kind of hidden behind this thing. So let's take a nickel tour real quick around this. So the website has a start-stop button. Each one of these has a start and stop button. And there's a console button over here I can click as well. So if you do like watching the text go flying by, it's right here. And you can clear that out. You can pause it so you can search through it, and you can pivot between your various services. You can also choose to say, show me everything all at once, and it will interweave them with a label on the side appropriate for whatever service you're using. So I have that little bit of insight there. I've also got the ability to come over here and look at details and see all the information about how this is running, including the environment variables that are being passed in here, right? So I can see that it's the development environment. Cool. We saw those logs. I have structured logs available here, and more than dealing with the console, I can now search here and see exactly when, oh no, tell me there we go. There's the weather forecast that it went to get for New York. But that's part of a trace that I can look at. I can bring that trace up and I can see everything that happened. I added 2 projects. I added 2 lines of code to each of those projects, and now I've got distributed tracing, structured logging, and metrics. So I can click into here, I can take a look at my web, and I can see request durations, how long each of those requests are taking to my website. I can come over here to the API, and I can see how long the requests are taking coming and going from the API. So I've got instrumentation with OpenTelemetry, open standards being delivered in a standard way without writing any code. This is fantastic. This is a great way for us to get started and get in and get insight into how our application is working. Now, there is an issue that happens, right? There's a exception that I built into this so that every 5th request, it'll actually throw an error. But when I click through here, I shouldn't have chosen the Alaskan ones. In the winter, Alaska goes offline at times. But you'll see that I don't have any errors here. It'll take a little bit longer, but eventually it'll come back. Now, what's happening over here is we'll be able to see it's retrying automatically for us. Right here, you can see it's doing some of the retries. And come on now. So we're going to see that it's my application misbehaving. Why are you saying rejoining the server, Matt? I hit a breakpoint, thank you. I hit the breakpoint for that exception. There it is. So I see the exceptions, and yeah, because I did a refresh. Let me hit it again. And I should be getting the retries coming through. And I can see that there was a resilience event occurred and it retries to allow us to maintain and deliver a good experience. Let me go to 2 questions about exactly that here. I'll go to this first question. How do you add project-specific settings for Poly or OpenTelemetry? For example, Quartz OpenTelemetry for Quartz worker projects only. So here's the deal. That service defaults project, you can customize however you want because it's C# code. So if you want it to behave different ways in different scenarios, well, instead of adding standard resilience handler here, you can go and update and actually write that yourself into your projects or extend and put a separate method there that you want to call and configure differently for whatever your scenario is. All the code is here and you can change it however you'd like. That's right. There's no black box going on here. The next question we have here is, how do you secure that app host? So this is a question we've gotten a couple times. And it's kind of a funny answer here, funny, ironic answer. This is primarily a developer tool. So you don't really have to secure app host because it's running on your system. It is secured with a token to allow you to log in because there are folks that might be working on shared systems, working on a shared machine, and you're going to be able to effectively secure and have your instance running with a token that only you see because you're the developer. When you deploy to a production space, your dashboard typically doesn't go with you. However, there are folks that do want it to go with them. This is only scaled to maintain a developer scoped set of data. It keeps the data for the logs in memory. So you can deploy it, but when it fills up, it will eject all of those messages and you will lose that tracing. You will lose those logs. So at that point, we do have a series of instructions that you can go through on the Aspire repo that'll help you with that. We also have, on the Aspire repo, there's a bunch of instructions that'll show you how you can set up OAuth so that this knows, here's my provider, here's the claim that I'm looking for that will allow people access to the dashboard. Let me go to this. Is Aspire suitable or appropriate for production scenarios? Aspire is a developer tool. So what it's doing, what it's adding here is stuff that helps you, and the logging, the telemetry, the tracing, that stuff will get deployed. The configuration for it will get deployed to production. If you don't add that configuration, if you don't set up an open telemetry exporter, it doesn't do anything. There's a no-op. So it's just fine to deploy to production. This website, that QR code and this thing, that's Aspire. That's all running with Aspire. So yeah, it's really good for deploying out to production. I'll go to this one last question and then we'll continue working through here. Do we need to keep all of our applications under the same domain or on the same server? Nope. You can run them wherever you want, and I'll show you how we will get those connected in the next demos that I'm going to do here around service discovery. So you can put them wherever you'd like. So my system's running here. We saw how it handles the events and the errors. Let's go and take a look at now how we can do a little bit of service discovery, because I don't want to manage this thing anymore. I don't want to push around connection strings or endpoints or APIs, locations. I'm going to get rid of that. And inside my program over here, this is for the API. I'll go to the one for the website. Inside the website, it sets up the HTTP client so that it can find the weather endpoint. Well, I'm going to connect the two by coming over here and telling the web app about the API. And I'll do that by saying with reference. And I will pass in the API. I also want to make sure it starts, that the website starts after the API. So I can also tell it, hey, go ahead and start after that. Let's also make sure that we indicate this website is the external endpoint for this application system. So I'll put those couple items of configuration in there. And now, because I have the resource name API up here, I'll go back into the website configuration and I can get rid of this, go look up the URL from configuration, and I can change this location to just HTTPS plus HTTP API. So now I'm going to go connect to the API resource. And this syntax says use transport layer security, use an SSL connection. And if you don't have that available, fail over to standard port 80, plain old HTTP, and go use the API resource. I don't know where it is. I don't know what it is. Go find the API and use it. And our service defaults has that configuration built for us. So now, if I restart this, right, that's restart? Yeah. Now, if I restart this, we'll have the dashboard pop up and we'll take a look and get this running. There we go. And go to my website. I've got weather stations and I've got weather. Nothing changed here. This still works. But over here in the dashboard, I have these features running, and I can go over and I have a graph now, a network graph that Aspire is building for me that shows here's the two resources that we have, how they're connected to each other, and the green check, they're both working properly. This is going to grow as we enhance and grow our system. Pretty cool stuff that I don't need any kind of other system to generate a network map. I'm going to get it automatically from Aspire. Let me go here to this question. If an API and web project are configured to run in a Docker container, can Aspire work with containers? Oh, yes. Yes, it can. We'll come to that in just a few minutes, and you're going to see we're going to load up a bunch of containers here. This leads right into the next demo. How do you configure the API in deployment scenarios? So check this out. How does the web know the API URL? If I go into the web's details and I scroll down here, here's my environment variables. All the way down here, you see, don't show it that way. You see services _API HTTP. Services _API. It's kind of hidden off the side there. I've got all the goodies here on screen for you so that you can see what's going on, and it's kind of hiding it. Yeah, you're going to do that to me again, aren't you? There they are. So the URL for API is being passed in as an environment variable. And you're probably already doing this with some sort of connection string or some other environment variable that you're using to pass into your containers to tell it, here's where the other services are. So what we've done is we've standardized the format for that, and we have a clear description of this is how we pass in that information so that it knows where the other service is. That value can change, and I don't care. Fantastic. My source code, me as a developer, I'm just going to the API, and I feel good about that. All right, continuing here, we're going to next go to an external service. So the next thing that we have to deal with here that is kind of frustrating, inside this National Weather Service, there is a reference, a hard-coded reference to the National Weather Service API here. Now, that's not a terrible thing when we're dealing with weather requests, right? I make requests for the weather. That doesn't make too much of a difference. But what if that's Stripe? And you're testing and doing unit tests, integration tests, you're developing, and you need to go and test hitting that Stripe endpoint. Do you really want to be testing and charging the boss's credit card a penny every time you need to look at that? Now, there's developer endpoints and things you can work with, but when you need to swap that out to get into your production space, that's kind of a mess, and I have to come through and edit that or set it up as a configuration endpoint. So let's do that. We can make that what's called an external reference. So I'll come up here, and let's call this, let's just call this NWS, and I will say bob.add external service, and I will call this NWS, and the location of that is this. So I'll paste that in, and now I can tell the API about that with the same with reference syntax, and just tell it to go to, not news, NWS, there we go. So I'll go back over to my NWS manager, and I can replace this with just NWS. So now my my site doesn't need to know exactly where the National Weather Service endpoint is. There it is. It's going to go discover it, use it, and use that reference when it needs to. Very cool. I have a couple questions that have come in. I want to make sure I get these. So there's my National Weather Service indicator, and I'll come up here. We'll restart the website. There it is running. And if we go get somebody's weather, there's the weather. So it still works, and I can come through and look at a trace here, and I very clearly see that the web made a request to the API, and it went out to the National Weather Service location and returned that data. So I've started obfuscating and hiding some of that information that I don't necessarily need all the time. I can put it in one place, and when I'm ready to deploy, I can swap that out. Because inside my API, I'll go back into the details. Now we have services NWS down here that has the location of the National Weather Service. Terrific. Let me go to a couple questions here. I'll go to, I hope this works. Oh no, I'm getting errors coming off of the website. What did you do? That's fine, I have the questions up here. I can speak to them even though I won't be able to put them up. The first question I'm going to go to says, the environment format looks like it can be done in app settings production JSON. Yes. Does it have to be an environment variable? By making it an environment variable, you're injecting into your application from outside the application, and you don't need to maintain files on disk. That means you can configure it on outside of your containers in a Docker Compose configuration, in a kubectl, in your Azure portal, and so on and so forth. You don't have to put it in app settings production JSON. Next question, if the API project has dependencies like a utility project, how do those dependencies show up in Aspire? Those class libraries that they reference do not show up. You only see the resources, the actual things that you launch and manage. My API and clients are in different solutions. Will they all be added as external services? This is a problem that we're trying to resolve right now. Really, when you have things that are running in separate solutions, and you're trying to debug and test them, you're inevitably bringing them together in the same place to have them work together. You aren't doing it, but you want one solution because you're running them all together. So we're trying to figure out a good way to enable that without forcing you to put them in the same solution. Why is Aspire a better option compared to other tools like Swagger or similar API documentation and visualization frameworks? Because Aspire is not just documentation or visualization. Aspire, you saw, is doing the resilience, is doing a dashboard, is doing telemetry management, is doing the console and logging management and presentation. So there's a lot there under the covers that we're getting and doing and we're able to use. So we like that. We like that a lot. There's going to inevitably be problems at some point, and this problem happens every now and again. You have somebody do something like this, and right, there's a typo. You don't know that it's a problem, but when you go to run your application, it's going to come up, and we're going to have an issue. Go to my weather forecast. And I've got errors coming up here, right? I'll let that flow through. I should really run that without debugging attached. And it's kind of where we've got errors coming out here, unhandled exceptions, internal server error. It's just a mess all over the place. Well, I can look at the trace of these things and I can see what's going on. And for Visual Studio subscribers, you'll get GitHub Copilot running inside of this, and it will be able to investigate and help you out with this. So if I go into my structured logs, and if I go to one of these, I can actually go in here and say, ask GitHub Copilot. And I'll be able to use Copilot to interact with those logs. It'll investigate and it'll report back and show me what it thinks the error is and how I can resolve that. So I can see here it's pointing to the wrong website, right? And it's giving me root cause analysis, recommendations, and so forth. So Copilot is able to help us out with that. Now, one of the questions that I have here that came in a little bit ago that was trying to get to this point before I was ready to show Copilot running on the dashboard. Hey, what about other editors like Writer? How can they get access to be able to use Copilot? There's various product decisions that are going on around allowing other vendors, other competitors, quite frankly, to be able to access and insert and deliver their own features on the Aspire dashboard. You can still use the GitHub Copilot features in here. You have to sign in and you can launch it from the command line and it will work. It is not integrated with Writer, and that's a question for lawyers and negotiations that I'm not going to answer right now, but that's a competition collaboration thing. All right, let me move on here. We've done that. We've got the things set up so that they can see each other, and we showed that demo. But when I saw that error come up, there's health checks built into here. I can add more health checks to make this easier to use and to get more support and information out of this. So let me go back into my API. Here's my API over here, and it's also up here. I'm going to add a package, and I'm going to add ASP.NET Core, health checks, URI, that one. And what this will do is it'll test those endpoints and show me an appropriate health status if I can or cannot get to them. So that's in the box now. I can go back over here and I can add additional health checks to this. So when I did add service defaults, well, it's added health checks, but I can add more health checks because this is additive. I can say add, I should be able to, no, it's builder services, add health checks. Yep. And I'm going to say add a URL group. There we go. Yep, that's kind of what I want. And name, let's call this National Weather Service. Cool. And I'm going to do some configuration on here. Well, health status dot, I need a using statement. Health status dot, if it's not there, I'm going to mark this as unhealthy. And I need to also configure the client. Now, here's the thing. The National Weather Service requires you to pass in a request header that says who you are. So default request headers add user agent. It's my .NET Aspire demo. So I've added that into the mix. Now, if I go back, let's rerun the application. We'll be able to see there is, when I go to the API, there is a health endpoint here that's enabled on all of my services, and it comes back and says healthy. That's not very exciting, but if I go back into app host, and if I still have that problem with my domain name and we go and restart this, I should have started it in standby. I'm so excited to show this, I forget to do it without debugging. So close that one, that one. There it is. If I come back over here and refresh, it comes back unhealthy because it can't get to the National Weather Service. I can also add that information into my app host so that it shows up on the dashboard with my API. So if I reach into the dashboard, into app host here, and on this, the API, I can say with HTTP health check, and it's going to go to /health. So now let's rerun that. It's still going to the wrong address. But see here, it's got resources running, but not in a healthy state. And because it's not healthy, the website's not starting either. So if I view details over here, it says it's running, it's unhealthy, and at that point, I can investigate further. Cool. I'm getting insight into how this is running, and I'm getting it here on my dashboard. Let me go roll that back, and we'll get into our next demo. Folks were asking about containers. Let's do some containers here. So change that back to the right location. So I know that the National Weather Service only updates their weather forecast, but every 15 minutes, right? And that's good to know. That gives me an opportunity to be a good internet citizen and properly cache things and not hit them all the time. So let's add in a little bit of output caching, and we'll use Redis to help out with that, because Redis can do the output caching and deliver and show this in a really nice way. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose Add .NET Aspire Package. And inside here, I'll go to Aspire Hosting Redis. I'll choose to install that. Yes, go ahead. And with that added, here, I can now start adding Redis into my system. So let's call this the cache. And we'll say bob.addRedis is now available. And I'm going to call this resource just cache. And I want to make that cache available to my API. So I'll use the exact same syntax that I was doing before with reference the cache. I should wait for the cache to be available. So I'll add those two lines, and now this will start Redis and make it available later on inside my system. I need to make one more change. I'm going to go back over here to the API, and I'm going to manage NuGet packages. And I need to, this time, add Aspire. It's Aspire something Redis. There we go. Stack Exchange Redis output caching. That's the one. So this will add output caching with Redis, but it's going to be aware of Aspire. That way, it'll do the service discovery for us. So inside of program over here, not program. Yeah, no, I was right. We added service defaults, we added health checks. So now I'll tell it about add Redis output cache. And I'll tell it the name of that service, that resource, is cache. Now, that's the same resource name that's here, right? So these strings need to match up. Now I can start this. Yeah, I can restart this, and it will start to use that Redis output cache. So, oops, I don't have Docker running. So let's go start Docker. It's going to warn me that the container is unhealthy here. While that's starting, question here, can a compiled binary or exe be added using with reference? You're going to do builder.addExecutable, and you can point to your executable to tell it to launch. Yes, you can do that. Oh, look, that's working now. Fantastic. Does it support Azure Functions? Yes, we do have support for Azure Functions. You can add them in and light them up so that the functions know about the other services, and the other services know where the functions are. Is there a best practice? You don't have to pass around magic strings. Yes, you can create a class library and put those constants in there and then share that class library around. There's one little thing you have to do with that class library. You need to mark it so it's not an Aspire resource, so that it shows up as a reference, not as a project that it's going to host. So there's my Redis cache. And if I go back over to the website should just work. There it is. The website works. If I bring up, and great, it's doing its thing, and it's using Redis cache. I don't really know that. It'd be nice if I had some insight into what's going on inside of Redis. I'm setting you up because I can add Redis Insight. So check this out. Inside App Host, right? Redis Insight is a cool little tool that you can use to query Redis, check out the status of your cache, wander through, run queries, clear out things, and you can add it by saying with Redis Insight. And now when we start this, it's going to start up my Redis cache. It's also going to start up Redis Insight right there. And if I go back over here, we restart the website so that it's querying, and I go through and click on some of these. I can take a look now in Redis Insight, and I've got this cool little tool that Aspire has delivered for me, and I can see exactly the content that it cached and is delivering. So now I've got more observability into what's going on in my database, right? This is getting cool. Let's keep going here. I've got Redis showing me what's going on, and I'm able to cache and deliver some of that content I've got my website updating and showing some data, and it's going to cache this data. We can even see the time to live. It's going to expire and eventually exit the cache. So for my next demo, I wanted to go through and I wanted to take that weather website and I wanted to add AI to it. Look, I'm a Microsoft employee. I am required to talk about AI. So here's the deal, right? We all want to add AI into our applications, and quite frankly, I'm going to plead with you. Don't add the stupid text box on top of things, okay? You can do better than just the text box. Let's do this. I want to summarize the weather forecast, and instead of just showing my cool blue, purple background here, let's show a background that's kind of inspired by whatever that forecast is. Just do the analysis of what the text is, summarize it, and give me one word that is, here's what the forecast is, and we're going to paint that and put that on the screen. Okay? That's not bad. That's a decent use of AI that while cheesy and simple for a demo, I think you kind of see it's not too bad to add into the mix here, right? I'm actually going to jump over to the completed code because I don't think you want to see me type all this in, but all the completed code is in that link that you can get to from the QR code. So I'm going to open my project. We are going to go up here. This is Aspire Dev to deploy, complete. There we go. So there's my app post, there's my API, Weather Hub, and service defaults. We have in the box now, it's not in the box, we have an integration that you can add for the GitHub models. So in case you don't know, there are free LLM models that you can use on GitHub. Go ahead and create a reference to it. You don't have to download anything. You install a package. I'm adding it here inside my app host, and I'm specifying I want to use the GPT-4o mini model. There's newer models, but this is an older model that will run fast enough for me. I'm calling it AI, and I pass that reference into my website using the same with reference syntax. You seen a pattern here? If you walk away from here knowing anything, with reference and wait for, okay? Job done. So now, because I'm passing that reference into my website, if I go over to the website, I can add some NuGet packages, and I added a few over here for Aspire Azure AI Inference, so it'll detect which model it's using and go load them up. I've added Extensions AI, Microsoft Extensions AI, Microsoft Extensions AI OpenAI, because we're using OpenAI, and because it's GPT-4o mini. And now I can interact with that by specifying over here, add Azure Chat Completions Client AI model. AI model, right, that string to the question we had earlier, and it's a great question, and I have a good tip for how you do that with the get rid of these magic strings. That AI model text there, that string name is the name of the resource there, okay? Add Chat Client gives me that abstracted Microsoft Extensions AI iChat Client reference. So I wrote a little class over here called the Forecast Summarizer, and you see it takes in an iChat client. And because I'm using the abstraction, I now will get the ability to swap out models, providers in the future. You want to bring in a Claude model? No problem. Change it over in program, and this still works the exact same way. Okay? You want to change model from GPT-4o mini and you want to go use GPT-5? Cool. This still works the same way. I added some meters in here so I could see things like how long did it take to make the request? How many tokens did I use? This is standard open telemetry things. And quite frankly, I asked Copilot to build it. I'm not going to show you Copilot building it, but trust me, Copilot built it, okay? Summarize forecast async. It doesn't get any simpler than this. Check this out. So I'm going to start an activity, so I got a nice trace event, start a stopwatch so I can record that time that it took, and then I wrote a prompt. Now, I know you've heard a lot about AI this week, but I stress something because I ran into this and I've heard a lot about AI, and this is something that, quite frankly, ticked me off. Like, I had to go and walk the dog. I was so mad at my computer. I'm like, what the heck is the matter with this? Prompt is very simple, 4 lines. You are a weather assistant. Summarize the following forecast as one of the following conditions: sunny, cloudy, rainy, snowy. Only those 4 values are allowed. Be as concise as possible. I want a one-word response with one of these options. Notice I stressed 3 times there are 4 options. Wouldn't you know, the first time that I ran that and it came back, when I searched for Miami and it said clear. I don't think I was clear. Talking to the AI is like talking to a 7-year-old that's had way too much sugar. It's day after Halloween, and that 7-year-old doesn't care what you're saying. Where are the parents in the room? You are going to be the best people at writing these prompts because you know what I'm talking about. My daughter is an elementary school art teacher. Man, she's getting real good at writing prompts. Have a fallback scenario, okay? The AI is non-deterministic. So even though you gave it some instructions and it's going to try to play in that sandbox, it might not always. So I'm setting tags and information about, here's the condition that was found. I'm going to indicate if the fallback was used, and I'm going to record the request duration. And you see some other things here where I set things like the number of tokens used. Let's start this and I'll show you exactly how we bring this into and complete the demo. And then maybe I can show you a little bit of what deployment looks like, and maybe even get into that other question about how do we do this with class libraries. All right, so now you're starting to see more resources on my dashboard. There's my cache, the National Weather Service. Now my AI model is here. There's an API key that is being set for me. I'm almost positive it's not live anymore and I'm going to need to reset it. But you're going to need to connect out to GitHub and get a token that will allow you to interact with the API. And then my API service and my web. The GitHub model was passed in as a reference to the website. So if I come over here, we scroll down, in my environment variables, right there, I have connection strings AI model. And if I take a look at this value, you see endpoint, blah, 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 and there's my token, okay? So it's being passed, it's being protected, and it's being hidden there so that it's not right out front for me. This is actually saved into user secrets for the app host project. Hey, let's go back to the graph. Check this out. We've got a bunch of resources in here now, and my resource graph is growing. My National Weather Service external reference there is being referenced by the API. The API also references my Redis cache. The website connects to the API, and I've also got over there the AI model, and the AI model is referenced by the key. Now, this is growing and getting more interesting, right? We have customers that print this as a PDF, and they're able to take it into meetings with IT folks and show, here's what I'm building, here's where this thing is going. Really useful to have that available to you. Let's go to the website and show this whole smash working here. So there we go. There's my weather, and I'm going to go look up Philadelphia. There we go. And I'm going to get my weather for Philadelphia. There it is. Current condition cloudy, and I've got a background there that looks a little bit cloudy, and tonight is mostly cloudy, and so on and so forth. Okay? I added in AI. I got a little useful service there. You could do this with regex, but I'm showing it with AI. And it's interesting now, right? Because that could grow, change, and I can do other things with that. But check out my traces now. Now I've got, here it went to go get the forecast, and I can see that request. And I can see over here when it interacted with the AI model and how long that actually took to interact with the model. Maybe I want to move my model in-house. And then I can test and see how long it takes running on-prem, because I'll have that visible to me here. Even more, because I added metrics for that, I can now jump into here and I can see my Weather Hub weather forecast summarizer, the request durations for interacting with that, and I can see the number of tokens used. Let's put that in a table. 141 tokens to make that request to GitHub. And I've got some other filters that I can apply down here to see what's going on. We've taken what was a simple little website that connected to an API, and we've started growing it up, right? We started raising it. We've added features so that they know how to discover each other. We've added features so that they can do caching. And it was literally 2-3 lines of code every step along the way. That's why I don't mind live coding this one. So when you go along and do this, what I want you to take away is this is easy for you to do. It's low impact, it's low touch on your existing systems. So the person in the audience who mentioned they've got 100 projects in there, that's okay. You're going to make one little change to add service defaults into them, and you're going to get amazing benefit right from the get-go, because that telemetry is going to start being generated for you. And you can extend the telemetry however you need to. Add your own metrics, add your own additional tracing and reporting and logging that's appropriate for your system. Nothing keeps you locked into just what's here. This is an entry point. You can go enhance it, modify it, and take it where you need to. So let's take it where we might need to, and let's talk about deploying this to Azure. Because you would normally come in and you would choose one of these projects and go in here and say right-click and say publish, and it would go off and do all the things. But because this is an Aspire managed solution, I can come up to, right, it's on that one? No. I can go on the app host, right-click, and say publish. And it's going to start walking me through the process of setting up publication for a .NET Aspire system being delivered to Azure Container Apps. And it's going to give me options for locations and subscriptions, just like you would expect. And I can give it an environment name, and I'll call this My Weather VS Live. Finish, and it's going to create the profile for me, and now I can actually go through and deploy this. And what it will do is it's going to put all those resources that we declared into containers. And it's going to deploy them into a container registry and place them inside the same resource group for this. Now, there are other integrations that we have available that wire automatically to Azure resources, so that you can, instead of saying add Redis, hey, thanks so much, I don't want you to do that yet. Instead of saying add Redis here, you can use an integration that's specific for Azure and say add Azure Redis, and it will, by default, go create an Azure cache for Redis for you and connect and use that while you're in development mode. However, we know that you probably don't want to work all the time with a resource out on Azure. You can do that, but as a developer, it's nice to be able to run in containers locally. So there is a with container or run as emulator type of method on all of those things that you can run locally, so you run the app locally. Now, I'm not going to go through and show an actual deployment, but what I will show you is an application that I did deploy, and I saved a bundle on my car insurance. Now, this is Aspirify.net. When .NET Aspire was announced, because it was .NET Aspire at the time, folks started talking about needing to Aspirify applications, and that's a domain name. So I built a news website for Aspire with Aspire named Aspire. Pretty good. So this is deployed from GitHub Actions. The source code for this is not publicly available, but I can show you that Aspirify.net website. The design is, it's a paid design on the website, so I can't publish the design. After you go through and set up that deployment, it will give you, hey, thanks so much, right on time. And it will give you a GitHub Action script. Yes, we're still in YAML. We did all this work to get rid of YAML. We still have YAML. So close. Missed it by that much. It's going to give you a base configuration here that's going to set up, check out your code, get you connected to Azure, get you all logged in up there, install AZD, the Azure Developer Command Line. Go log in with Azure here using the credentials that you'll put into your GitHub secrets. Restore.net, restore packages. This is something that I do. I added unit testing to my project. I added publishing, I added this, but these last two are where the power of Aspire and AZD come in. We're going to provision the infrastructure. It's going to look at the things that you have deployed in your resource group, and it's going to allocate things that might have changed and knock down things that are no longer used. And then it's going to deploy. It's actually going to publish and push that content out to Azure. So if I go out to Portal Azure Com, and I will show you the resource group for this. I think is it that one? I think it's that one. If it's not, I know how to get there. Yes. So here's the Aspirify Net resource group. So I'll zoom out just a touch. So you can see it creates a bunch of stuff here. A private container registry so that all of your containers for your apps live in one place and it's isolated, protected for just you. I put together a data migration service, so whenever my database changes, it updates automatically. Somebody was asking about Azure Functions. There's Azure Functions running in a container. A container apps environment, think about that as your own instance of Kubernetes that you can work with. That's oversimplifying what it is, but think of it that way. Okay, I've got an Azure storage account. I've got a key vault because I've got secrets in there. I've got API keys and things that I use that I had keyed into user secrets. Well, instead of them sitting in user secrets, they sit in key vault for me in Azure. So they're protected by default. I've got log analytics. I've got managed identities that control who can actually run the website and go connect into my other resources. I've got an Azure database, another storage account for storing all the thumbnails on the website, and then finally the website. It looks like a lot, but these are small things that it deploys and you can manage very, very easily out there. I am just about out of time, and I will go to one final question here before I wrap up. If you wanted to use Kubernetes to spin up extra resources for a container, how would you configure that in the Aspire deployment process? There's a tool out there right now that was written by somebody in the community called Aspirate. Asper, the number 8. And this is a tool that you can use to install and deploy your Aspire resources to Kubernetes, to Docker Compose, and then ship that wherever you want at that point. We're working on integrating this and making it part of the standard Aspire toolkit, but right now, this is available that you can use, and it's as close to production ready as it can be right now. Things are kind of in flux and moving as we're growing this story. But that's a really good question about using Kubernetes. Thank you for that question. That's all the time that I have. We are at time. I want you to check out aspirify.net so you can keep up on some of the news and things. Of course, we built, launched, and ran websites here with .NET Aspire. I hope you check this out. When you go home, you can go to aspire.dev. It's linked underneath the QR code there. Those resources will be available. You'll be able to come back to that website and click through to the source code, the slides, and the demos, and learn all about that. But aspire.dev is the source for all this stuff. All right? Check it out. You're going to have a great time using it. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your VS Live. My name is Jeff Fritz. Thank you so much.